This is the Dave Elliott Show.
And good morning. It's Tuesday, August 11th, 2026. Glad you could find us here this morning on the radio or on YouTube or wherever you're listening. I guess you don't listen to us on the radio anymore, but you know what I mean. We have a tropic situation out there. Nothing to worry about, per se. But they're watching the tropics very closely. 3 areas of interest. One is up by Bermuda, and it's heading away from the United States. The other one just came off the coast of Africa, and that's the one that we're going to keep an eye on because of where it could go. The other one looks like it's heading for South America and isn't going to be a real threat to us. But the one coming off the coast of Africa is expected to turn to the north before it gets to Florida. So that one may not be a threat either. But we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll let you know if it turns out there is something there. Let's see. Is there anything else I need to tell you this morning? I think that's it. Have a nice day, everybody. No, I'm sorry. We're here today. We've got a great show lined up for you. We're going to be talking with Paul Hiltz, who is the CEO, Chief Operating Officer, whatever you want to call him, at Naples Community Hospital, or as it's now known, Naples Comprehensive Health, NCH. He'll be with us at 7:30 this morning. Tim Aten will be in around the 8 o'clock hour, a little after 8 o'clock this morning, and we'll be talking with him about what's new in town, and there is a lot happening in that regard, so I hope you can stay with us there. Weather-wise, it looks like our rain chances are a little less than they were last week when we were pretty much soaked every day. But we will get a little bit. Some people will see some rain. Some people won't see any. One of those kind of deals. Anything else new this morning? How are you? You can let me know how you're doing by sending me a text at 305-699-2665. And we open the phone lines when we're not taking a guest on the phone. We open the phone lines at that same number, 305-699-2665. And that's a chance for you to just weigh in on what we're talking about, ask a question, get some info, tell me I'm nuts, whatever it is you want to do, you can do that at that number. Now, today is kind of a big day in history, at least in the history of this country, and I think it's worth spending a couple of minutes to talk about. I like interest. I'm not a big history fan, I will admit. When I was a kid in high school, man, history was the farthest thing away from my mind. I just didn't get it. Why do we have to talk about a bunch of dead people, I would say? Well, on August 10th, which is was 250 years ago yesterday, news reached London that the Americans had done something dastardly. They, or we, if you prefer, had drafted the Declaration of Independence. Now, remember, this draft occurred on around July 2nd, or thereabouts, was presented to the Continental Congress on July 4th. So it took a little over a month for the word to get back to Britain what these knuckleheads in the colonies had done. Knuckleheads not by my accounting, but by the accounting of the king. Until the Declaration of Independence formally transformed the 13 British colonies into states, both Americans and the British saw the conflict centered in Massachusetts as a local uprising within the British Empire. To King George III, it was a colonial rebellion, and to the Americans, it was a struggle for their rights as British citizens. However, when Parliament continued to oppose any reform and remained unwilling to negotiate with the American rebels, and they hired a bunch of people. They hired some German mercenaries, the Hessians, To help the British Army crush the rebellion, the Continental Congress began to pass measures abolishing British authority in the colonies. You're going to do that to us? All right, we're going to pass a law that you have no authority to do anything. So there. In January of 1776, that was earlier that year, Thomas Paine published Common Sense, an influential political pamphlet that convincingly argued for American independence from the British monarchy. It sold more than 500,000 copies in just a few months. Now, even by today's standards, 500,000 copies of anything is a lot of copies. By the spring of 76, several months before the Declaration was formally created, support for independence had swept through the colonies. The Continental Congress called for states to form their own governments, and a 5-man committee was assigned to draft a document declaring independence from the British king. Largely the work of Thomas Jefferson, by the way. The 5-man committee included John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, and 2 other people. John Locke was the philosophical basis for the Declaration. In justifying independence, Jefferson drew generously from him. Locke was an advocate of natural rights, and he also took some work from other British theorists. It wasn't like he just sat up one night and said, I have an idea, this is what I'm going to write. He did some research. The Declaration features the immortal lines, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If nothing else, they ought to just teach that line to every student in school. Let me read it a little slower and with some feeling. We hold these truths to be self-evident. In other words, we believe it's obvious this is the case, that all men meaning humans, not just men, but in those days they didn't say humans, they said that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator. You see how he references the created equal and then the Creator, with certain unalienable rights, things you can't take away from them. And those things that you are born with, according to Jefferson and the philosophies he borrowed from, are, among others, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Doesn't mean you're going to be happy, but you have the unalienable right to pursue happiness. And then it goes on to present a long list of grievances that provided the American rationale for the rebellion. This according to the History Channel. I could do an hour just on that opening line of the Declaration of Independence. We have strayed so far away from the Declaration, haven't we? Do we really think we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I think many people say, yes, absolutely. We're able to live our lives freely and try to make a happy life for ourselves. But there are others who say, no, the fact of the matter is, you don't have the right to those things. We're going to tell you what you have the right to. Oppressors. They're out there. They're in small numbers, and I think they're in the minority, but they're out there. And sometimes those voices tend to be heard over the din of the positive voices because, negative stuff, negative news travels faster. But it was 250 years ago yesterday that the British found out, hey, that bunch of people that are across the ocean, they're not ours anymore. And boy, King George was not happy. He was not happy at all. Of course, you know about the Boston Tea Party, no taxation without representation. You know about the American Revolutionary War. You know about all that stuff. But think about the opening line of the Declaration of Independence and remind yourself that if I could make a change, it would be this. One word. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. People, not just men, but in those days, men meant people. So thank you, Thomas Jefferson and the founders, for that document and that philosophy and those immortal words, because I think it's important that we remember those words as we move forward, particularly now that we're in silly season or election season, as I like to call it. I don't like to call it election season. I like to call it silly season. That's what I meant to say. Did you hear about the president? You know, he was in Turkey recently. And what you don't know, unless you just saw this today, is that apparently he was snuck out of Turkey after the Iranians threatened his life. Snuck out. At the end of a recent international trip, they created this elaborate plan involving decoy jets and a catering truck, all in an effort to avoid an Iranian assassination plot, according to the Washington Times and the New York Post yesterday. I'm sorry, did I say the Washington Post and the New York Times? I think I said it backwards. It's the Washington Post and New York Times. What's wrong with me? In early July, Trump had flown to Turkey to attend a NATO summit aboard the new Qatari-gifted Air Force One. But once in Turkey, hostilities resumed with Iran, and Trump announced that the new jet would depart for the United Kingdom and that he would fly out on the older powder blue Air Force One, the one with the different, the colors you're used to, the powder blue and gold and white. But according to new reporting by the Washington Post, the president was not on board when it departed. Instead, he was secretly transported off Air Force One and moved to another military jet to fly out of Turkey and to the United Kingdom. I'm not sure how you, no offense intended, but how do you possibly not notice that a guy as big as Donald Trump was secretly moved from an airplane on a tarmac? Apparently, the method used to conceal the president was a catering truck, typically used on the tarmac to deliver food and beverages to airplanes, the Washington Post reported. Members of the White House staff and press flew aboard Air Force One, unaware that Trump had taken a separate plane for his safety, the Washington Post reported, citing a review of materials. An unnamed U.S. official and another person familiar with the president's travel said. The New York Times also reported the story last night. A White House pool reporter shared from aboard the powder blue Air Force One, "We are wheels up from Ankara as of 8:43 p.m. One at a time." I'm sorry, at the time he shared that. He said, "We have been advised to keep our window shades in the press cabin closed. See you on the other side." So apparently, you may recall Mr. Trump made a comment that we may be done. I'm not sure we're still on the air. It doesn't appear that we are streaming.